My guest today joining me is the founder and the CEO of the LA Football Network, hosts his own podcast, Believe in the in LAFB podcast, with 13-year veteran in the NFL defensive lineman, Frosty Rucker. He also just covers all things LA football related, USC, high school, UCLA, LA Rams, LA Chargers. And with that, it's my pleasure to bring on to the show Ryan Dyrud. Ryan, good morning. How are you?
Jonah, good morning, man. How you doing?
It's been a little bit. You look good. How's everything going with the family?
Everything's good, man. It has been a bit, but yeah, everything's great. Busy as all get out now with the NFL season going, but hey, we couldn't be happier and things are good. But hey, before we get into it, heard your little segment there. That fight would be amazing. De La Hoya, I live in Pasadena, so I see De La Hoya everywhere around Pasadena. Like I saw him literally 3 days ago. I would love to see that fight.
Would you pay for that?
Oh, 100%. I paid for the, I'll be honest, I paid for the friggin' Logan Paul Mayweather fight. So
you did. Okay.
It's easy for me to pay for cheap entertainment.
I will concede that one. I kind of just found off of Reddit, to be perfectly honest with you.
That's the better way to go.
So Ryan, let me ask you. I want to jump right in because I'm sure that there are a lot of things that you've been thinking about when it comes to these LA teams. I certainly have. Let's start with for me, one of my teams is the UCLA Bruins, and coming into this season, there's all this excitement. You go into the Fresno State game, you lose because a hobbled quarterback goes 6 plays, 75 yards in 54 seconds. And next thing you know, it seems like all this tremendous momentum on what could have been a tremendous season comes crashing down. What were your thoughts on that loss to Fresno State? And did it seem like to you like there was something perhaps with the coaching, or was this more just, hey, it's a college football letdown?
Yeah, I mean, it was a heartbreaking loss. No way around it. I was there at the Rose Bowl, and you could just feel the deflation on that drive from the fans. I was in the press box; we could see it in the press and all that. So, no way around it. But I kind of took a different approach about it, and I wrote it in a piece right after, and then talked about it on my show yesterday that as bad as it felt for that loss, and the way they lost it, as horrible as that was, and that you said it, the 6 drives, 70 play yards, and under a minute, like it just can't happen. But Fresno State's a good ball club. They're a good football team. I know it's Mountain West. It's always the Pac-12 should beat the Mountain West, especially UCLA should beat the Mountain West. But I thought right after that game, like, okay, this is going to be a ranked team. They took Oregon to the brink. They blew out the other 2 opponents by, 108 points they put on the board. So it's a good offense. It's a good team, well coached. They have a great offensive system they've kind of put in place through the last few years. So for UCLA, it was tough, especially coming after the LSU loss or LSU win, having a bye, having this time to really prepare. But for me, it wasn't like the world's ending. I think this can still be a special team. They haven't even started Pac-12 play yet. They can win out in the Pac. I think it's going to come down to UCLA and USC in the Pac-12 South, especially how we've seen kind of Utah and Arizona State fall from grace. So this is a team that I think can still do special things. And, if they were to win out in the Pac-12 and go to the Rose Bowl, and you never know what can go after that, and win the Pac-12, and, maybe Fresno State ends up in the top 15, so it doesn't even look like that bad of a loss in the last second. So the last thing I'll say is I said this, in my opinion, is the best offense UCLA will face this season. I mean, I know Oregon is a solid team, but it's a different offense. It's more similar to what UCLA does. They want to run the football. Their quarterback moves around a lot. They don't have this just prolific pass attack. USC, if they did what they did last week against Washington State, maybe that can change. But until we see it back-to-back weeks, Fresno State's the best offense this UCLA team will face. And I know it's a loss, but they took them to the brink. It was a great ball game. Once the dust settled, I think people will realize that, they lost to a good team and they can get things back going though. That's
actually a good point, because in fairness, they did challenge Oregon. They were really strong in that game. So if they do finish ranked, that would be interesting. So I actually want to bring up something you mentioned about kind of the overall outlook of the Pac-12, because to me, it was setting up so that you've got Oregon and UCLA. Yes, they were on this a little bit of a collision course. They're going to face off October 23rd, but it seemed like the college football playoff was kind of, for the Pac-12, their chances were kind of hinging on those two teams staying atop the rankings. Now, obviously, there's still Oregon in there. how do you think UCLA's loss kind of impacts the Pac-12's outlook at a potential representation in the college football playoff?
Yeah, it's, it seems like at least lately the Pac-12, in order to have even a shot, they have to go undefeated, right? Like that's just the way, unfortunately, it's been. And until the committee changes or until they add more teams, it might remain like that. However, the fact that the AP poll, when it came out right after the weekend, and it jumped Fresno State to, I believe, 22. UCLA dropped to 24 from being 13 the week prior. So Fresno State's now in the top 25. So if they can stay in those rankings and, they win the Mountain West and they do the thing. So long answer, basically, it kind of almost hinges on what Fresno State does. Like if Fresno State finishes strong and finishes in that top 15 or whatnot, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, UCLA, goes to Oregon, beats Oregon and Eugene. They finish out, they win the Pac-12. Their one loss is against a quality top 25 opponent. Then I think they still have a shot. They absolutely still have a shot, but it's going to take some help. It's going to take Fresno State finishing the season strong. And outside from that, Oregon, obviously, I think they'll have to win out. It just seems like every year the Pac-12 almost needs to go undefeated to even be talked about. Because you have USC now, that horrible loss against Stanford, but who knows? Maybe they run the table. Maybe they're like, are they in the conversation anymore? It's always that fun debate with us Pac-12 guys that we get into it with the Big 12, the Big 10, and the SEC. But we seem to lose that debate every year. So
well, that's been the issue, is sometimes you've got different teams in the Pac-12 kind of catching fire at almost the wrong times. You're almost wishing like they could have started out the year kind of undefeated. But let's stick with USC, because to me, Ryan, this head coaching vacancy right now should be, in my eyes, one of the most sought after positions across football, let alone just college football, given the brand, given just all the success that they've had. And when I think about USC, and you had John McKay and John Robinson and Pete Carroll, guys that had tremendous success, the one nexus between all those guys was some connection to the NFL. Now, the times in their careers that all those guys were coaching at the NFL were different. Some started at college, moved up to the NFL. In the case of John Robinson and Pete Carroll, started NFL, college, and the other way around. But I was hearing all these reports about potentially a guy like Eric Bieniemy being looked at, who I thought I was vouching for him. I think he would be a tremendous fit. What do you think about Eric Bieniemy? And who do you think, if it's not Eric Bieniemy, if he's not a good fit, who do you think USC should be targeting along with the current list of candidates that they have?
Yeah, so Eric Bieniemy, interesting name that came out, and the guy's going to be a head coach at some point, whether it's college or pros. Certainly deserves it. For USC, it's interesting because I think obviously the offensive mind is there. Like he can coach a football team. He has the offensive prowess and whatnot. What it comes down to for him would be recruiting and the other side of college football that has so much more than just being a coordinator in the NFL. I mean, according to the NFL, you're dealing with adults. You show up in the meetings, you teach your X's and O's, you call the right plays on Sundays. And that's basically it. College football has so much more that goes into it, making sure these kids are in class, making sure they're doing stuff off the field correct. Now with the whole NIL rule, like how much goes into that, and the head coach is involved, and then recruiting. And he's never really had to recruit. He was in Colorado, had a pretty poor tenure there. This was like over a decade ago. So I'm not really concerned about that by any means, because obviously just like players, coaches can grow and change too. So to answer your question, I guess somewhat shortly, is I think he would be a good coaching candidate for USC, but it's going to really hinge on his staff that he brings in. Like if they can bring him on and somehow retain Dante Williams, who's the interim head coach, who is, in my opinion, a top 3 recruiter in the entire nation, then I think it's a great hire, because you have your X's and O's coach, you have a good face of the program, a guy that the nation has been wanting to be a head coach, so you get that backing. But then you keep Dante Williams, who does the recruiting, the behind the scenes stuff to build the program. Because if I'm Mike Bone, after what we just went through with Clay Helton, with Steve Sarkisian, basically everyone since Pete Carroll, you don't want to just take a chance on a guy. Like you have to have calculated risk. You can't just take a risk on a guy that's a good X's and O's coach. You have to have a guy that's going to come in and be a CEO of your program and build that thing back up. Not saying Eric Bieniemy can't do that, but he just has never had to. So it's like, do you want to take that risk and put him in a position to have to all of a sudden be the face of USC and do everything besides just coach on Saturdays? So I'm personally, at this point, I'm not 100% for it. I wouldn't hate the hire, because I do think he's a great football coach. I just know there's so much that goes into college coaching, and especially with USC. I think the boosters would like it because, it would put butts in seats. People will be fired up about him being here in LA. So, I mean, there's that to it. If you want me to go into my candidates that I like quickly.
Yeah, I was going to say which candidates do you think would be right for that job?
So my favorite, honestly, I'm a big Dante Williams guy, the interim. I think truly, I know this isn't the sexy one, but I think that Mike Bohn and his staff will at least give him a shot to win the job. Not saying it'll happen, but I don't think we'll see what happened to Ed Ogeron happen again, where, he kind of won the team over. He kind of won the fan base over. People were fired up about him. And then they went on and ended up hiring Clay Helton instead of Ogeron just because he didn't fit the mold. I think Williams will have a true shot. Like if he runs the table and wins the Pac-12 and ends up going to the Rose Bowl, how do you not bring him in after what he does with recruiting, what the players mean to him, what he does for this organization? So I think he'll have a good shot. I think the outside sources, my big three, my favorite is Luke Fickell, current head coach at Cincinnati. Mike Bohn hired him at Cincinnati, brought him in. Fickell's built a powerhouse there. Now it's Cincy, joining the Big 12. The question is, will he want to leave? Because, I mean, he's an Ohio guy. He coached under Urban Meyer's staff at Ohio State. Now Cincinnati's becoming big time going to the Big 12, so the recruiting pool is going to open up more. He's going to get offered a lucrative contract, so he may be happy to stay in Cincinnati. But if not, I think he'll be the number one candidate for Mike Bohn. After him, I love Matt Campbell at Iowa State. Anytime you make a school like Iowa State relevant, you deserve to be in the head coaching ranks at a big-time program. And, 3 years ago, it seems like every year we've been talking about potential coaches for SC because Clay Helton's been on the hot seat since he was hired. And me and my buddy Tal, my former co-host, we brought up Matt Campbell 3 years ago. Like, here's a guy to look out for. Like, I think he's going to be a hot name. And now he's kind of been a hot name for 2 years. But love what he's done at Iowa State. Multiple coach of the year in the Big Ten. So he'd be a great fit, good character guy, good recruiter. And then the last one, which I know has been reported on some, I don't know if it'll actually happen, but Jonathan Franklin at Penn State. Again, what do you want to leave? I know Penn State's a big power program, but I think he's kind of taken them to like where they as high as they can go. Like it's not easy to recruit to Happy Valley. You got to travel a lot. There's not a lot of big 5-star guys there right around the Happy Valley area of Pennsylvania. Comes to USC, he would have to travel, 15 miles, and he could have the pick of the litter at Mater Dei and St. John Bosco and all the great talent we have here in Southern California. So, I know he's got a great job at Penn State, but I think he's kind of run its course almost, and I don't know how much higher he can elevate them. Whereas he comes to USC, and all of a sudden he just has that much more talent to deal with and to coach. So those are kind of my big three, plus Dante Williams on top of it.
That's interesting. Yeah, Dante Williams. Listen, give him a chance. See how he can do.
We saw, Jonah, not to cut you off, but we saw last week how the team came out after 4 days firing their coach. It looked like the same old song and dance. It looked just like the Stanford game. And then you see Williams on the sideline get to work, and you see him start changing the motivation, changing the culture. And then in that locker room, they come out. They hadn't scored a touchdown in 7 of their last 8 games in the third quarter, and they put up 28 last Saturday. So something to be said there.
And by the way, just out of curiosity, who does Frosty like? Who does he want to be the coach?
He likes Dante. I mean, he's a good big Dante guy. I mean, they're buddies. They text and stuff. He likes Luke Fickell. He personally doesn't think Fickell's going to leave though. He thinks Fickell's staying there in Cincinnati. So
gotcha. All right, so let's transition to the Rams now. Off to this great start, 2-0. Granted, Ryan, it's extremely early, and who knows if Stafford's going to have more success than Goff. I don't know, but I will say that early on, it certainly looks promising. And to me, what's already been extremely evident are two things. One is clearly McVay has been opening up the playbook. You're seeing just so many more big time plays that are being disposed right now and utilized by Matt Stafford. 250-plus yard touchdown passes in the opening game. They only had 2 all of last season. And then you follow that up in a game against the Colts, who granted, Carson Wentz, they got quarterback issues, but at the end of the day, you faced a little adversity. And to me, that was the game where I felt like the entire roster and the entire coaching staff fully put all their trust in Matt Stafford and fully embraced him, because this wasn't a game that they looked good at really at all, yet they came away with a win. So I'm curious, you covered the team. What were your kind of initial thoughts on the Rams so far this year through the first 2 games, and how much better, if at all, do you think they'll be with Matt Stafford?
Yeah, well, I think the sky's the limit, especially for this offense. And, one thing I've talked about a lot is this is a team that, Sean McVay doesn't believe in playing starters in preseason games. So whatever your thoughts on preseason games are, I know there's mixed emotions, but it's tune-up, right? You at least get a couple drives, get on the same page, because it's a different game speed than what you do in practice. Well, the Rams didn't do any of that. So they're kind of using these first couple games to really actually get on the same page, get the timing down, get everything succinct. It's a new center playing at that offensive line with your quarterback. So the two kind of most important cohesive positions are both brand new. And so far, they haven't looked bad. I mean, they've had their struggles every now and then, but I think overall they've looked good, and they're just going to continue to get better. And we haven't even seen Deshaun Jackson or Tutu Atwell, involved in the offense whatsoever. And those were kind of brought in as the deep threat guys, but we've seen Cooper Kupp and Van Jefferson in the deep threat. So what's interesting, Jonah, about this offense is, and this is not a discredit to you or anyone else, but if you don't watch it closely, last year, these plays were there, these deep plays. Goff just didn't take them. So if you watch like all 22 and stuff, there were many instances when the deep ball was there, the option was there, and Goff would either take the check down or hold on to it too long, get sacked, or scramble in the pocket. So it wasn't that necessarily that Sean McVay's totally reopening it up. It's just that now he has a guy that's actually going to utilize the playbook and, take the open man down deep, which is very refreshing to see in these first two games. So I agree with you. It's kind of a sloppy game against the Colts, but this is a playoff team. I thought it was a fluke, their week 1 loss to Seattle. I think this is a very good team. That's same thing, brand new quarterback. They've had some injuries at offensive line. They've had some turnover on defense. So they're just kind of also getting the oil going in the machine. So I thought it was going to be a battle between these two teams, and the Colts are probably the favorite to win that division. So anytime you win on the road, sloppy or not, it's a good thing. But I think the sky's the limit for this offense and the defense, which we don't need to get too much into. But I know that if you go on Twitter, Rams fans think all of a sudden the defense is bottom 5 in the league since Staley's left. But statistically, they're actually better through 2 weeks than they were 2 weeks last year. So I know they gave it 24 points this prior week. There was a couple drives that the Colts were able to sustain, but they're predicated on limiting big plays, letting you dink and dunk, forcing you to run the football, and then clamping down in the red zone. That's kind of what their MO is they're just they'll give up yards. They're not going to give up points. And so that it worked on Sunday, and when we'll see as it continue to grow with Raheem Morris becoming the helm there on the defensive side.
So that thought actually perfectly segues into the LA Chargers, who I want to ask you about, because to me, I think there are a couple certainties right now. The certainties are Justin Herbert's great. This team is a really talented team from top to bottom. They've got tremendous playmakers. I think that Staley's will be a good coach in the league, and the Chargers have kind of been this team just percolating, kind of ready to emerge, but they just haven't quite been able to do that. Mm-hmm. And the big reason to me is because the NFL comes down to late game execution and kind of being able to convert in the red zone. And just like you touched on how the Rams might give up yards in the middle of the field and then clamp down in the red zone, that's been the biggest issue and the biggest struggle for me watching the Chargers is they can't score in the red zone. They're 2 for 6 against Washington, and Herbert, they had to settle for a couple field goals and an interception. And again, against the Cowboys, they're moving down the field. They should be putting up more points, 2 field goals and an interception. When you're watching the Chargers, do you think that their biggest issue right now is their inability to kind of finish off drives with actual points? Or do you think, listen, it's just early on in the season, they're just trying to find their rhythm a little bit, they'll figure it out along the way?
Yeah. Well, before I even answer that, how many times does your buddy Jonathan Rifkin hit you up a week about Justin Herbert? He's got to text you at least 3 or 4 times a week.
Too many times. And the main retort I have is Russell Wilson. That's the main guy as a Wisconsin guy, that's the main guy I can throw back at his face.
There you go. You guys got 2 good ones. Since I went to Long Beach State, we don't have football. I can just kind of pick whoever I want and claim.
That's nice. That can be nice.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. Undefeated since 91. That's what I always say. But anyway, so yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Jonah. This is an issue that I talked about back during training camp, and it's an issue that will get resolved. It's a brand new system with Joe Lombardi coming over from New Orleans. And they're still working out kinks. They're still working out personnel. I mean, that a lot of people don't talk about that, but when you install new systems, you're also installing new personnel groupings to run those systems. So yeah, you have the same players, but you got to see which personnel works within those systems. So red zone is very different than what you're doing between the 20s. So they're still kind of working out the kinks, seeing what they want to do with those, seeing what's successful, what's not. Obviously, we've seen a lot of what's not. And we saw that in training camp. There was every practice I was at, it was the defense won resoundingly in the red zone. The offense would move the ball down the field. They get to the red zone. They go 2 for 8, 2 for 7, 2 for 6, 2 for 9. And so it's just something about the plays they're running, whether they're abandoning the run too quick in the red zone, which is something I kind of think. I think it seems like once they get past the 10, they drop back in shotgun and let Herbert throw it 3 times, which, when you have a quarterback like that, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I think it's becoming, just 2 weeks in, it's almost too predictable what they're going to do. I mean, you saw on the pick that Herbert threw in the red zone, I love Herbert and I love his aggressiveness, but I know Keenan Allen fell down, but he threw it into triple coverage. There was literally the tiniest of windows, if no window at all, even if Keenan Allen hadn't fallen, and you have triple coverage there. So I think they need to, get back to the basics, get running the football, trying to get smash mouth once you get past the 10-yard line. But they'll get it figured out. It's 2 weeks in. They won against Washington in a game that they would have lost last year. I mean, how many times last year they lose close games? They end up getting the ball back and holding on to it for the final 7 minutes to just run the clock out. And then against Dallas, it just wasn't their day. Dallas is a good football team. Unfortunately, they got jobbed by a few calls by the refs, which I never am one to blame the refs. You play 60 minutes. There's a lot of plays, but when you get 2 touchdowns taken off the board for questionable calls, it's certainly not going to help you. But yeah, with the red zone, I mean, it's certainly an issue. It's one I think they'll get cleaned up. And I think it starts with actually running the football more and not just throwing it 3 straight times once you're past the 10.
Yeah, we'll see. And the AFC West is appearing a lot more difficult now than perhaps we might have thought. The Broncos undefeated, Raiders undefeated, the Chiefs are
who
still.
Who would have thought 2 weeks in the Raiders and Broncos would be first in the division?
Well, this is the first time I think in I forget how many years, at least since Mahomes has been there, in 3 years, that the Chiefs haven't been atop the AFC West for the entire year.
Yeah,
crazy.
Yeah. Start to finish.
Ryan, thank you so much for joining me. Where can people find you? Where can people listen to all your content?
Jonah, this is great, man. Appreciate you having me. We got to do this more often. I got to have you on my show too. So you do. I love your show. Watch it all the time in the morning. So keep up the great work. But yeah, everyone can find me just on Twitter at Ryan Dyrud, LAFB. We are the LA Football Network, like Jonah said in the beginning. So that's LAFBnetwork.com. We cover all LA football, Rams, Chargers, Trojans, and Bruins. We got 7 podcasts on the network. We're putting up like 30 articles a week. We're on YouTube at LAFB Network. So a lot of ways to consume content, and we're trying to do it the best we can for LA football, because I just feel like there's a less than ideal coverage for those teams. That's what we're here for. So thanks for having me, man.
Awesome. No, thank you so much, Ryan. And let's definitely do this more often. This was fun to have you on.
Absolutely, bro. So keep up the good work. Enjoy your morning. Okay.
Thank you. You too.
All right.